Hello, welcome to chapters 11 and 12 of the fourth treatise. I did end up combining them. Chapter 11 is really a one-page introduction to the Prelude, so I did put them together. So let's begin there. Chapter 11 tells us the future is yet to be created. Now, this may seem like a no-brainer. The future isn't here right now. The future comes next. But when it's telling us it's yet to be created, so it's an unknown. It hasn't happened yet. It hasn't been planned. We can't prophecy about it, because it's a complete creation, which means it's present moment and it's not static. But that future depends on, when it comes to you, what you're willing to leave behind. Are you willing to leave behind the way you've always lived and your role as the learner, the seeker, the one who's becoming? And are your willingness to step into your role as creator? And when we think of our role as creator in the past, a lot of us have that formulated as, it's been framed by an idea of someone who is able to manipulate the dream we're in. In other words, I'm able to create a good parking space when I go downtown. I'm able to attract money. I'm able to attract the house I want, or the car, or the spouse, or whatever it is. And that's not the kind of role of creator that we're talking about here. Because this whole world that we have thought we were living in is not reality. So we're talking about creating on an actual level. And you can't create by using the mind. You create using this other thing that we're pointing to, and that we're going to get deeper and deeper into as we get into the dialogues. So he tells us in verse 3, I now willingly resign as your teacher. In unity, there's no need for teachers or learners. So those who have formed a strong attachment to the persona of Jesus might feel a little shaken, like, what? Now who? Now what? But the truth is, it's our oneness, the idea that there is only one, that is coming into reality now. And when we come into the recognition that there's only one thing going on, there's only one being, how can we have a teacher and a learner when there's only one? So when we are in unity, it's really not possible to still relate to each other from separation. And having a teacher and a learner is an idea of separation. So we now move from the idea of learning to the idea of sharing. And that again is pointing to that one being, that one essence, that energy, that every one and every being knows, because we share it. We come from the same source. We're the same being, expressing and expanding and exploring in all these different varieties. Verse 5 says to us, read these words in a new way. This is the beginning of our co-creation. Do not seek for me to impart knowledge in these concluding words. Absorb the following pages as a memory returned to your reunited heart and mind. No longer regard me as an authority to whom you turn, but as an equal partner in the creation of the future through the sustainability of Christ-Consciousness. And again, the Christ-Consciousness that we're looking toward is this new thing of living in the dream while still maintaining an awareness of our oneness, of who and what we actually are. So this is what all of this is pointing to, and what the dialogues will be getting into more specifically. Now we move to chapter 12. So he says, from this time on, I will respond to you through direct communication or dialogue rather than through teaching. So is this going to be the persona of Jesus speaking to the persona that you have individualized on some level that you haven't known before? I guess you can look at it in that way, but that's so limiting. Because actually, if we are all one, and there's only one being, one creative energy, then it's there, in that place, with that awareness, that you will actually get direction and guidance, and be able to sort of change your frequency according to what creation is asking. This dialogue will be ongoing, and your concerns will be met with a response. And this I can absolutely attest to. Every time a challenge arises, there is a response. There is an answer. So you don't have to worry that you're going to be left on your own. It's always going to be there for you. It's going to be your go-to. So two big changes are happening now, one of which is the end of learning, recognizing that I'm not going to find it in books and materials and assessing knowledge and accumulating information, and the process of sharing in unity. And to me, this does not mean that I, as a character, am going to be in the same room with other characters and we're going to discuss how this affects our two characters. That's not what sharing in unity is. It's something else. And he even says right here, your mind will be surprised. So I'm not going to point at it too directly, because it's so much fun to discover for yourself. And when you do that, your mind is going to be surprised. And it tells us in verse 6, take delight in these surprises. Laugh and be joyous. You no longer need to figure things out. Surprises can't be figured out. They are meant to be joyous gifts being constantly revealed. Gifts that need only be received and responded to. So when you do this process, this unity, then you're going to see things that are going to just really bring you joy and freedom and open you up and make you laugh. So you can still participate in activities that you have found meaningful, like church, books, and meetings. I mean, life goes on, the dream goes on, but it means that the point of doing them is no longer learning, but sharing. Like, by sharing it, it's helpful to come to this awareness of what is. That's a pretty apt description of sharing. Be aware of what is here. Go ahead and do them, the activities, until you no longer want to. And this is a fun thing that happens. Your life and the activities in it are probably going to shift around a little bit. They're going to more accurately match who you are and what you want to be doing. But first you really have to give up the idea and the pattern of learning. And he says to release the idea that you even need to learn. Verse 10, as long as you continue to invite learning, you will continue to invite the conditions of learning. Be vigilant of your thought patterns so that you eradicate the idea of learning in separation and replace it with the idea of sharing in unity. Let's break this down so you can really get a handle on what this might look like. So let's say that I have a challenge come up in my life. Let's say that people are always concerned about money. Let's pick a money one. Let's say that I don't have the money to go on the vacation. that I wanted to go on. So I take that situation, if I'm going to invite learning, now I'm going to say, okay, let me apply everything that I have learned and figure out how to deal with this disappointment. Maybe I'll take what money I do have and I'll investigate other vacations that I can take. Maybe I'll find ways of dealing with my disappointment. Maybe I will research things to do in town, learning how I'm going to deal with this disappointment. When I see my thought patterns going in that direction, there's a fixing element to it, right? So the learning is actually, I'm trying to look for a way to fix this disappointment that I'm feeling, that I'm not going to get to do what I wanted to do. So I need to fix the feeling. That's a learning condition. When we drop that and we replace it with the idea of sharing in unity, now our approach is different because we're coming to an awareness of what is. So instead of trying to fix what I thought I wanted that isn't happening, I'm now joining with what is happening. So I see that the money isn't there. How does that feel? And I go within and I join with the feeling. I accept whatever is happening and I join with whatever is happening. Because there's one thing happening. And I can absolutely trust that whatever is happening just needs to be joined. Even if the feeling is it's a feeling of disappointment. Even if whatever shows up. Anyway, I don't want to get too far down this trail because this is really a taste of what the dialogues are going to bring to us. And you'll get much more in-depth training as you move through the dialogues. So let's move to number 2. As a learner, you always looked for the next challenge or call to growth. But now you can exist in continual contentment. Continual contentment. That doesn't really sound possible, does it? From the lives that we've led so far. Or if we did have it, it sounds pretty boring. When you think of a cat curled up in a chair asleep, is that what's going to happen now? I'm just going to be content and there's nothing fun, nothing exciting, nothing challenging, nothing to learn, nowhere to grow. And that's completely not it. So let's look at the idea of contentment. What is contentment? So when you're content, you're happy with what's happening. You're not seeking anything. Your needs are met and you're satisfied, right? That's contentment. Your needs are met, you're satisfied, you're happy with whatever shows up. It doesn't mean that you won't expand or express or discover. Quite the contrary, quite opposite. That's exactly what you're going to do. You're going to expand and express yourself in wonderful ways, and you're going to discover amazing things. There will be new revelations all the time. The only thing that will be missing is suffering. So learned wisdom in the human experience has these characteristics, and we're really going into it now because he says it's really important for us to get a good look at the old patterns so that when they come up again, we recognize them and let them go. So in the human experience, we have to look for progress. And we have to push against the limits. This is the setting the goals and achieving them. We have to work hard and suffer and struggle because it feels so good when we finally get it for about 2 seconds, if we finally get it. Usually the goal changes by the time we get there. Fear and judgment are your guides, and they really are. Because if you're afraid of something, you realize, ooh, I'm afraid of that. I shouldn't go that direction. And judgment is important for you to decide, well, it's probably not a good idea for me to be involved in that or with that person. And they're really tools that we use when we're coming from the learned wisdom experience. And the whole idea that the strong survive and the weak perish. I don't want to be weak. I need to be strong. That which doesn't kill me makes me stronger. That's that whole dynamic. And these are old ideas of progress that they just can't persist into the new. So throw out these old ideas and begin again through joining, not learning. Joining whatever experience you're having as a human, rather than trying to fix it and learning ways to do that. So verse 18 says, think and speak no more of the suffering of the past. Tell only joyous stories. Advance the idea of joyous challenges that allow for all the creativity you have put into challenges of the past, but without the struggle. So you're not being asked to lie about your suffering, but just to leave the suffering behind and to stop struggling against what is here in your life in this second right now. And then the challenges that you have are just going to keep freeing you. You're going to keep unloading stuff. And this happens. And I'm sure you've already experienced it happening. That things come up that you have identified with closely, and they come up to be cleared. They come up to be dropped. And more of that will happen. Absolutely. And each time that you allow it to be there, you'll clear another piece of the old away. And every time a piece of the old goes away, there's a freshness and a newness, and the one that you actually are rushes in to fill that space. You will still have challenges, and it's fine. It's part of this process. Don't worry about it. Won't bother you. Verse 19, I ask you to try to remember to turn to the new rather than the old, each time you think you are experiencing uncertainty or lack. Just want to remind you of the whole fallacy of lack idea from chapter 10. Lack is not possible. You may be experiencing something you didn't have in mind, but you're not lacking. You're having that experience instead of the other one. The only thing that can hold you back from sustaining Christ consciousness is doubt about yourself. And this is really fear. Reject the instinct so ingrained in your singular consciousness to let doubt of yourself take hold of you. And we all have doubts about ourselves when we are seeing ourselves as that limited, singular being that we have thought that we were. We thought we were this one being that had a little spark of spirit in it. And we have a lot of doubts about that one being because we've been trying to conduct life from that one being's thought and the system of learning, and there have been some real bumps in the road, and we don't really have faith in that separated self. And that's good for you. You shouldn't have faith in the separated self, but it's not the separated self that we're looking toward right now. And even as you look toward the separated self, recognize how much you've done to get where you are right now, how far you've come. There's something in you that's been awakened that won't stop. What you've seen cannot be unseen. Trust it to carry you forward. Don't let the patterns of the old take over and pull you back into your lack of faith about yourself. So the patterns of the old thoughts will continue until you create a new pattern. And this is really important because the mind is going to throw back at you all the old patterns of thought. So it's really important to be vigilant and be aware and notice when your mind reverts back to self-sabotaging thoughts and thoughts about that point to the fact that you're just this really weak and flawed individual self. Remember at those times, remember that this weak, flawed individual self is just an idea. It's not even real. It's an idea you had And now you're moving toward your true self. Verse 22, again, let me remind you that we are speaking of the new. There has never been a sustained Christ consciousness in form. It is not a learned state. It is your innate consciousness, a consciousness far too vast to be learned, but one easily shared by all. This verse can be a little puzzling. There has never been a sustained Christ consciousness in form. What about Jesus? What about Buddha and Krishna and, all the great enlightened teachers? Weren't they Christ consciousness sustained in form? That's a question that arises in this, but it is telling us that there's something new. And it's possible that what it's saying is it's new for you. But the truth is, there's only one. So who is it new for? It's new for the one, as experienced by you. And anytime we're mixing something that's time-bound with something that's not time-bound, it's going to be a little boggling to the mind. So the best idea is to just accept that, yep, okay, it's never been experienced by me before, and there's only one, so I can go with that. And it says it's not a learned state. You can't learn how to do it, but it's your innate consciousness, a part of you. It's who you actually are. And it can be shared by all because all is an expression of the one. In order to know this consciousness, it has to be shared. It can't be grasped by a singular mind, and it's not available to the separated self. It can't be learned. Okay, so what do we mean by that shared? Again, it goes beyond being with another separated self and talking about loving things. It's actually entering this field of energy that is shared by all expressions in the one. That's what sharing is. And if the mind doesn't understand it, that's okay, because you're going to actually experience this rather than just have a mental concept of it. And that's where things are actually known, is through experience, not through a mental concept. That's exactly what this is pointing to. It's not a mental concept at all. It's an experience. Verse 25, you have already achieved all that was possible to achieve as an individual. The purpose of individual learning was the return of unity. Rejoice and be glad, and turn your attention to the new. So it's not like, well, I'm really good at this learning logic thing, and I don't want to leave it behind because I finally got good at it, and this is where I've achieved everything I've gotten so far was by doing this. Right. And it got you here. It got you to this point where you are on the precipice of letting go of the old way and stepping into the new. So congratulations. All that learning and everything you were drawn to has served you well. Verse 27, it is the way in which you will come to remember and share in unity that concerns you now, and what we are speaking of when we talk of patterns. So this is what he's going to point to, this voice, I'll call it the voice now, is exactly where you can experience this field and the patterns that will be conducive to having that experience. Free will and love continue in this new pattern. What it means to create in relationship and unity, there we are, will be revealed to you through your experience of being in relationship and unity. Verse 29, you do not have to choose to share because you cannot not share. You do, however, have to refrain from choosing separation. You do have to refrain from choosing learning and the conditions of learning. So it's right there. You cannot not share? Because sharing actually means an awareness of oneness. And since there is only one, how can you not be aware of being only one? It just points back to you. But in order to have this experience, you have to refrain from choosing separation. So you have to actually create a new pattern of remembering what you are instead of identifying so closely with this character that you've created for yourself to play. Simply become aware of what already is. It will help us establish new patterns. And what this is pointing to is what is here in this moment. What's true for me right now. Start becoming aware of what that is. The answers to the elevation of the personal self and the living of Christ consciousness in form are yet to be revealed and shared. So it's a coming. You still exist in space and time, but space and time no longer separate us. So there's still the experience of being in the dream, but there's a recognition of what's really going on. The new design will be mutually decided through our mutual revelations and responses. Okay, so what does this mean? If we're not separated and there's only one, to be mutually decided, there have to be more than one, correct? So that's part of the little puzzle that we're going to look at more closely, because it would appear that there's more than one. There seem to be other characters in the dream, and yet they are me. That's what we're going to go into more deeply. We are already an interactive part of this design. Creation will respond to what we envision, imagine, and desire. And here is pointing again to that same. This creation couldn't begin without you, because you are creation. You are God. The future is up to us. All of these multiple expressions of the one creation and the one God, which is who you are, and acting as one body, mind, and heart. So that's where creation happens, is when all these expressions recognize who they are. Verse 36, make no mistake that what is asked of us is everything. What is asked is our total willingness to abandon the old, our total willingness to embrace the new. But also make no mistake that what is given to us is everything. All the power of creation is released unto us. Let us begin. So when he's saying, he's asking us to give up everything. It's everything we thought we knew. Everything we thought was real. Give up the old way. And then what's given is everything. Truly everything, expanded and unlimited. Because it's who we actually are. So, thus we end Book 2 of the treatises, and it's been a great ride, but the ride's about to get even better as we move into the dialogues. I have, at first I thought I wouldn't do reviews of the dialogues because it's supposed to be a time of one-on-one with that voice, but from different people's requests and my own inner guidance, I was told to go ahead and review the chapters and the dialogue, and when we get to the 40 days and 40 nights, that's when these YouTube reviews will end. So I hope you will join me for the next chapters of the most wonderful, life-changing book. Thanks for joining me.